अक़वाम मुत्तहिदा की जनरल असम्बली के सदर नेशनल डिफेंस यूनिवर्सिटी में इस वक्त खिताब कर रहे हैं।
Headquarters had closed their doors because of the COVID-19 pandemic. Little did any of us realize the impact the pandemic would have on how we go about our work and our daily lives. This was the first domino to fall. It catalyzed a series of political, economic, and social challenges which required a multilateral response. People were suffering. Those who were in the most precarious situations prior to the pandemic were pushed closer to the brink, at risk of being left behind permanently. My challenge was to reinstate the international community. As member states came to terms with the health crisis and related crises within their own borders, it was up to me as President of the General Assembly to rally the membership to commit to collective solutions for the people we serve. In this past year has taught us one thing, it is that nothing is certain. We need to evolve in peace and in pace with the rapidly developing world we are operating within. Make no mistake, I repeat again that multilateralism is the only path forward. The people of the world made this quite clear when surveyed last year. They want a United Nations that is fit for purpose, able to meet the challenge of the day, and the United Nations we need for the future we want. However, we have a long way to go before we meet the targets of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, uphold universal human rights, or achieve peace worldwide. COVID-19 has resulted in a loss of lives and livelihoods. The impact of the pandemic has hit the most vulnerable the hardest. As we face the deepest global economic recession since the Great Depression, global extreme poverty numbers are expected to rise as 115 million people are on the verge of falling into extreme poverty. 235 million people will need humanitarian aid this year. Approximately 690 million people are at risk of malnutrition. This has knock-on effects. In 22 countries, violence and conflict are the root causes of hunger. Millions of people are on the move, displaced due to conflict, persecution, hunger, and climate change. Women and girls have experienced gender-based violence at an unprecedented rate. Children are at high risk for child labor, child marriage, and trafficking. Xenophobia, racism, and discrimination on ethnic and religious grounds are on the rise. Violence against members of religious groups and places of worship have been increasing. Excellencies, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, we need to take urgent action now to reverse these trends. The multilateral system has suffered a great trauma as a result of this pandemic. Business as usual will not put us on the road to recovery. Now is the time for defibrillator. We need to shock to the system. That is what we are doing, and the United Nations is working to meet the needs of the people we serve when they need us most. The General Assembly is calling on all member states to come forward with solutions to the most critical problems facing the people we serve. Just last week, I convened a meeting on the situation in Palestine, following a joint request from Chair of the Organization of Islamic Cooperation and the Chair of the Arab Group. I convened this meeting in large part to compensate for the silence and deadlock in the Security Council. The Security Council must shoulder its responsibilities and overcome yet again its paralysis on this longest standing item of its agenda. Inaction on this issue undermines and indeed hinders the ability and credibility of the Council and the United Nations regarding other pressing peace and security issues. I hope that we will hear a unified voice from the Security Council on this important and urgent subject. As for the General Assembly, we assumed our responsibility under the Charter of the United Nations and met to address the grave violations of international humanitarian law and international human rights law. These violations caused the loss of lives for hundreds of innocent Palestinians, majority of which were children and women. The announcement of a ceasefire, as the UN General Assembly was still in meeting, was a significant development, and I claim that it was because the General Assembly brought this issue into its agenda that all the silent organs started talking about ceasefire, and they were reacting to the difficult situation. I issued an appeal for peace paper on the responsibility of the chair of the General Assembly.
असेंबली के सदस्य इस वक्त खिताब कर रहे हैं.
1.2 trillion in combined GDP and a combined population base close to 480 million, 80% of whom are under 35 years of age, is another example of Pakistan's pivotal role in South-South cooperation to create a future where no one is left behind. Excellencies, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, Pakistan is ably represented in New York by His Excellency Mansoor Ali Khan, Ambassador and Permanent Representative of Pakistan to the United Nations, but also the President of the Economic and Social Council for its 76th session. We have continuously worked and coordinated towards maintaining the ongoing cooperation between the two organs, the General Assembly and the ECOSOC, in order to enhance coherence and synergies across their respective works for the session. This has been most evident in sustainable development issues relating to infrastructure, countries in special situations, least developed countries, landlocked developing countries, and small island developing states, desertification, land degradation and drought, and financing for development. Ambassador Akram has consistently highlighted the necessity for private sector engagement on financing and the urgent response required for countries in significant debt distress. Pakistan is demonstrating leadership at the highest levels of multilateralism as one of the 5 heads of the principal organs of the United Nations. I also commend His Excellency Imran Khan, the Prime Minister of Pakistan, for highlighting the importance of ending illicit financial flows at the general debate earlier this year. For our best efforts to achieve the 2030 agenda will be derailed unless there is full financial transparency. It's critical that work to end all criminal activity which jeopardize our efforts towards a safe, just and sustainable future, and I trust that the UN General Assembly Special Session against Corruption, which will take place next week, will accelerate multilateral efforts to end the scourge hampering our progress towards 2030. In the same spirit, good efforts towards implementing the Sustainable Development Goals and maintaining peace will be undermined unless significant efforts are made to uphold the human rights of women and girls. If we are to create change, we need to move beyond rhetoric. We need to end gender-based violence for once and for all. Through stronger legislation against gender-based violence, reporting and redress mechanisms for victims, data collection, election observation, and violence monitoring, we will make progress. This will allow to facilitate the full, equal, and meaningful participation of women in society, the workforce, politics, and public life. Women bear brunt of conflict, and their needs must be met. Women need to be included in all elements of peacekeeping and peace building. As an international gender champion myself, I firmly believe that the world must recommit to the Women, Peace and Security agenda 20 years after its creation. Not only do women make a positive impact on peacekeeping environments, including supporting the role of women in building peace and protecting women's rights, in all fields of peacekeeping, women peacekeepers have proven that they can perform the same roles to the same standards and under the same difficult conditions as their male counterparts. Put simply, it is an operational imperative that we recruit and retain female peacekeepers. I commend the deployment of the first ever Pakistani female engagement team to South Kivu in the Democratic Republic of Congo. I thank these distinguished peacekeepers for their service to humanity. Indeed, I thank all of you who have served under the blue flag. You are the lifeblood of the United Nations. Excellencies, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, it's a privilege to address you here in the National Defense University, which has been the home of many Pakistanis peacekeeping personnel over the 6 decades since the first deployment to the UN peacekeeping operations in Congo. I applaud the 4,732 men and women currently serving in 9 UN peacekeeping operations around the world. And I commend the professionalism and dedication of the Pakistani military, police, and civilian personnel in these missions. Wearing the blue helmet, Pakistani peacekeepers are on the ground in some of the most dangerous missions in the world, putting their lives at risk to secure a better future for the most vulnerable people on this world. This scope and intensity of conflicts has changed dramatically since Pakistan first contributed troops in 1960. Today, we are seeking peace in an increasingly complex environment of parallel traditional and non-traditional threats, such as climate change, rapid technological developments, famine, infectious diseases, scarcity of water, and sanitation. To this end, I welcome the gains made advancing the Action for Peace initiative. Excellencies, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, from the moment I took office, my main concern and responsibility has been ensuring the uninterrupted and effective functioning of the General Assembly. Since the beginning of the 75th session, the General Assembly has held all mandated events and high-level meetings, sometimes in an innovative hybrid format, to allow virtual participation. This has been critical to ensuring the full implementation of mandates, enhancing dialogue and cohesion among member states, and guaranteeing the membership a strong, functional General Assembly that meets the challenges facing the notions of the world and the people we serve. I have now spent some time elaborating on my views of multilateralism. But if I had to sum it up in one sentence, I would have said this: I truly believe that the future of multilateralism lies in an agile, effective, and responsive General Assembly that is underpinned by political will to uphold the rights of everyone, everywhere.
इस वक्त आपको दिखा रहे थे अक़वाम मुत्तहिदा जनरल असम्बली के सदर वॉल्कन बॉस्कर NDU में खिताब कर रहे थे। उन्होंने कहा कि मसला कश्मीर का हल ज़रूरी है। इसके साथ साथ उनका कहना था कि मकबूजा कश्मीर की सूरत हाल का बखूबी इल्म है।
उन्होंने मज़ीद कहा कि मशरिक़ वस्ता में अमन तक जनरल असम्बली चैन से नहीं बैठेगी।